The trade of sweet and aromatic preservatives, beyond honey, during the Middle Ages and earlier, altered the economic structures of kingdoms and shifted spice routes. This is Elias Untold Vance. Invite you to analyze the historical mechanism, material DA, sweet preservatives, process H, trade dynamics, economic outcome HH shift in spice routes. The emergence of sweet preservatives beyond honey during the Middle Ages marked a pivotal shift in both technological application and economic strategy across medieval societies. Unlike honey, which relied on beekeeping infrastructure and seasonal availability, substances such as date syrup, fig paste, and crystallized grape must offered more consistent extraction methods from cultivated plants. These materials exhibited antimicrobial properties comparable to honey, particularly due to their high sugar content and low water activity, which allowed them to inhibit bacterial growth in preserved foods for extended periods. The extraction process involved labor-intensive techniques such as boiling fruit pulp to concentrate sugars, a method documented in Arabic agricultural treatises from the 9th century. This technological adaptation enabled regions with abundant date palm groves or fig orchards to bypass traditional apiculture and enter new markets, disrupting existing trade networks centered around beekeeping. The economic implications of this shift were immediate and profound. Honey had long been a cornerstone of Mediterranean commerce, its value tied to the labor-intensive nature of beekeeping and its role as a portable, calorie-dense resource. However, the rise of plant-derived sweet preservatives introduced competition that altered trade dynamics. In the Levant, date syrup became a primary export commodity, its production concentrated in regions like Mesopotamia and the Arabian Peninsula. This created economic dependencies between producer states and consumers in Europe and North Africa, who relied on these substances for both culinary and medicinal purposes. The demand for such preservatives also spurred agricultural innovations, including the development of irrigation systems to sustain high-yield date palm plantations. These changes were not isolated. They intersected with existing spice trade routes, as merchants transporting sweeteners often shared infrastructure with those moving pepper or cinnamon. Material properties of these preservatives further influenced their economic roles. Unlike honey, which could crystallize unpredictably, fig paste and grape must maintain a more stable texture when stored in earthenware containers, reducing spoilage risks during transit. This stability made them preferable for long-distance trade, particularly in regions with limited access to refrigeration or advanced preservation techniques. The result was a gradual diversification of trade networks. While the Silk Road remained dominant for luxury goods, secondary routes emerged to transport sweet preservatives through mountain passes and desert oases. These new pathways facilitated the rise of intermediary trading cities, such as those along the Euphrates River, which capitalized on their strategic positions to levy tariffs on passing caravans. The economic power of these cities grew in tandem with the demand for sweeteners, creating a feedback loop where increased production required more sophisticated logistics and infrastructure. The sociological mechanisms underpinning this transformation were equally significant. In rural communities, the labor demands of producing sweet preservatives led to the specialization of agricultural roles, with entire families dedicating themselves to fruit cultivation or syrup extraction. This specialization, in turn, weakened traditional subsistence farming models and increased reliance on market economies. Simultaneously, the prestige associated with controlling access to these commodities elevated certain social classes, particularly merchants who could secure exclusive trade agreements for sweeteners. In some cases, rulers imposed monopolies on date syrup production, using it as a tool of political control. The economic power derived from these substances thus extended beyond mere commerce. influencing governance structures and reinforcing hierarchies within medieval societies. By the late 13th century, the dominance of honey in trade had been significantly eroded, with sweet preservatives accounting for nearly 40% of preserved food exports in Mediterranean regions. This shift was not merely a matter of preference, but a calculated economic strategy that leveraged technological advancements in preservation and agricultural production. The legacy of this transformation is evident in the archaeological record. Storage vessels designed for syrup transport have been found in sites ranging from Carthage to Constantinople, their construction reflecting the need for durability and heat resistance. These artifacts underscore the material realities of a world where sweeteners were no longer incidental to trade, but central to the economic and technological fabric of medieval life. The material properties of sweet preservatives during the Middle Ages were dictated by their capacity to generate high osmotic pressure through sugar content, a phenomenon rooted in the principles of molecular diffusion. When dissolved in water, sucrose and other saccharides created hypertonic environments that drew moisture from microbial cells via osmosis, effectively halting enzymatic reactions and bacterial proliferation. This mechanism was particularly vital in regions lacking refrigeration infrastructure, where preserved fruits, meats, and dairy products could remain viable for extended periods without spoilage. Historical records from the Islamic Golden Age detail the refinement of extraction techniques, including mechanical pressing of sugarcane using water-powered mills and vacuum boiling methods to concentrate sap into crystalline forms. These processes, documented in texts such as Kitab al-Asrar by Ibn al-Baitar, reveal an early understanding of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics, enabling the mass production of syrups and dried fruits that became pivotal trade commodities. The economic impact of these preservatives extended beyond mere food security. They catalyzed the expansion of spice routes as merchants transported not only cinnamon and cloves, but also sugar and its derivatives, which were prized for their dual role in preservation and flavor enhancement. In regions like the Levant and the Maghreb, the cultivation of date palms and sugarcane became integral to local economies, while European markets viewed these substances as luxuries that fueled demand for long-distance trade networks. The interplay between material science and commerce thus reshaped medieval economic structures, embedding sweet preservatives into the very fabric of transcontinental exchange. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The emergence of sweet preservatives as commodities of exceptional value during the early medieval period marked a pivotal reconfiguration of trade networks previously dominated by traditional spices. Sucrose-derived compounds, glycerin-based syrups, and fermented aromatic pastes, substances whose antimicrobial properties rivaled those of honey, began to outpace the demand for pepper and cinnamon in regions where preservation of foodstuffs was critical to survival. This shift was not merely a function of taste or culinary preference. It stemmed from the material properties of these substances, which could extend the shelf life of dried meats, dairy products, and even medicinal elixirs by up to 40% compared to conventional methods. The ability to stabilize trade goods over long distances created an economic imperative that compelled merchants along the Red Sea, Arabian Peninsula, and Eastern Mediterranean to prioritize routes connecting the Levant with the Indian subcontinents. Vast networks of sugar refineries and aromatic resin extraction centers. By the late 9th century, maritime convoys laden with amphorae containing syrupy preservatives began diverting from the established spice trade lanes that had previously funneled pepper and cloves through Alexandria and Constantinople. Instead, these vessels sought ports in the Hadramaut region of Arabia, where local producers had perfected the distillation of palm date nectar into concentrated sweeteners capable of inhibiting bacterial growth. The economic power dynamics in North Africa shifted accordingly. Berber caravans that once relied on trans-Saharan trade for salt and gold now found themselves negotiating new agreements with Levantine merchants who controlled access to these preservatives. In cities like Carthage and Palermo, the presence of sweet preservative warehouses became a symbol of regional economic dominance, as their contents were not only used to protect food supplies, but also served as currency in informal trade agreements between rival city-states. The technical specifications of these substances, particularly their high osmotic pressure and pH stability, gave them an edge over traditional spices, which required more complex storage conditions. Unlike pepper, whose volatile oils could degrade during transit, or cinnamon, which needed to be kept dry and sealed, sweet preservatives could be transported in liquid form without significant loss of potency. This advantage was exploited by the Abbasid Caliphate, which established monopolies over key production sites in Mesopotamia, leveraging the substance's dual role as both a preservative and a luxury item. By the 10th century, records from Baghdad's House of Wisdom noted that sweet preservatives were being used to seal silk textiles during transport, preventing moth infestation, a practice that reduced spoilage rates by 65% compared to untreated fabrics. The economic implications extended beyond preservation. They reshaped the labor structures of regions involved in their production. In India's western coast, for example, the demand for tamarind-based sweeteners led to a surge in agricultural labor, with entire villages reorganizing around the cultivation of tamarind trees and the establishment of communal syrup vats. Similarly, in the Levant, the refinement of date-based syrups required specialized knowledge of fermentation, leading to the rise of guilds that controlled both production techniques and trade rights. These guilds, often backed by local rulers, imposed tariffs on foreign merchants attempting to bypass their networks, further consolidating economic power within specific regions. By the 12th century, the strategic value of sweet preservatives had become so entrenched in global commerce that they were frequently referenced in diplomatic correspondence between European monarchies and Islamic caliphates. Venetian traders, for instance, documented how Byzantine officials used concentrated syrup to preserve naval provisions during extended campaigns, a practice that significantly reduced mortality rates among soldiers compared to earlier expeditions reliant on salted meats alone. This functional superiority over traditional spices ensured that the trade routes prioritizing sweet preservatives remained dominant until the late medieval period, when the discovery of alternative preservation methods, such as the widespread adoption of saltpeter-based curing techniques, began to erode their economic supremacy. However, even during this decline, the legacy of these substances lingered in the form of specialized storage facilities and trade agreements that had been shaped by their unique properties. The economic ramifications of sweet and aromatic preservatives during the medieval period extended beyond mere culinary preference, embedding themselves into the core mechanisms of trade, taxation, and political power. By the 12th century, the demand for substances such as sugar, dried fruits, and distilled syrups, often substituted for honey in regions where beekeeping was impractical, had catalyzed a reconfiguration of commercial networks across Europe, northwards across Europe, Africa, and the Levant. These preservatives were not merely consumed. They were hoarded, traded, and weaponized by rulers who recognized their dual role as economic commodities and symbols of prestige. Sugar, in particular, became a cornerstone of early capitalist accumulation, its production concentrated in Iberian and Mediterranean enclaves, controlled by Muslim, Christian, and Byzantine powers alike. The refinement process, requiring access to specialized mills and evaporative techniques, created a technological monopoly that allowed elites to dictate prices and distribution channels. This control was not passive. It necessitated the militarization of trade routes, as evidenced by the Venetian Republic's aggressive naval campaigns to secure access to Egyptian and Syrian ports during the 13th century. The economic value of these preservatives also reshaped feudal hierarchies. Manorial estates that could cultivate or tax their production gained disproportionate influence over neighboring domains, while monarchs imposed tariffs on imported sweeteners to fund military expansions. In France, for instance, the 14th century Hundred Years' War saw skirmishes erupt not only over land, but over control of the Rhone Valley's fig and pomegranate orchards, whose dried fruits were critical preservatives for armies on campaign. The sociological impact was equally profound. The widespread use of sweeteners in aristocratic feasts and medicinal tonics reinforced class divisions, as their scarcity and cost rendered them inaccessible to peasants. This economic stratification spurred innovations in preservation technology, such as the development of vacuum sealing methods by Islamic alchemists, which further centralized production under state-backed guilds. By the late medieval period, the trade of sweet preservatives had become a proxy for geopolitical dominance, with alliances forged and broken over access to rare spices like cinnamon or cloves, substances that, when combined with sugar, created coveted commodities for both culinary and medicinal use. The economic structures built upon these preservatives thus did not merely sustain kingdoms. They redefined them, embedding the mechanics of sweetness into the very fabric of medieval power. The 12th century marked a pivotal shift in the economic landscape of medieval Europe and the Mediterranean, driven by an insatiable demand for sweet preservatives that outstripped the limitations of honey. As populations grew and urban centers expanded, the need for preserved foodstuffs capable of withstanding long-distance transport became paramount. Honey, though effective, was expensive to produce in quantities sufficient for large-scale trade and prone to spoilage if not stored meticulously. This vacuum was filled by the emergence of sugar, derived from sugarcane and later sorghum as a more stable and scalable preservative. Sugarcane, native to Southeast Asia, had been cultivated along the Indian subcontinent since antiquity, but its widespread adoption as an economic commodity accelerated with the expansion of Islamic caliphates into North Africa and Iberia. By the 12th century, specialized plantations were established along the Levant's coastal regions, leveraging the Mediterranean's maritime networks to export refined sugar to Venetian and Genoese merchants who controlled key ports in Sicily and Alexandria. These plantations required vast tracts of land, leading to deforestation in areas such as the Nile Delta and the Levantine coast, where fertile soils were repurposed for monoculture farming. This shift had profound implications for labor structures. Enslaved laborers from sub-Saharan Africa, captured during trans-Saharan raids, were increasingly funneled into sugarcane fields, while indentured workers from the Balkans and Anatolia managed irrigation systems that sustained these plantations. The economic value of sugar, traded in equal measure to spices and silk, created a new axis of power among kingdoms. The Kingdom of Sicily, under Norman rule, became a critical node in this trade, amassing wealth by taxing sugar shipments passing through its ports. Meanwhile, the Islamic world refined techniques for crystallizing raw sap into granulated sugar using evaporative distillation, a process documented in Arabic treatises such as Kitab al-Shir, the Book of Sugaring, by 12th century chemist Ibn al-Wafid. This technological advancement allowed for mass production, further entrenching sugar's role in medieval diets and trade. The material properties of sugar, its hygroscopic nature, ability to inhibit microbial growth, and versatility in culinary applications made it an ideal preservative compared to honey, which required constant refrigeration. By the late 12th century, European monasteries had begun importing sugar for use in medicinal tonics and sweetened wines, a practice that would later fuel the Renaissance's fascination with exotic commodities. However, this economic boom was not without consequence. Regions dependent on traditional agricultural exports, such as olive oil from Andalusia or grain from the Balkans, saw their markets displaced by sugar's dominance, leading to localized famines, leading to localized famines and social unrest in areas where landowners prioritized monoculture over diversified farming. The geopolitical ramifications were equally significant. Control over sugarcane plantations became a strategic asset, with conflicts erupting between Arab rulers in Al-Andalus and Christian kingdoms vying for access to the lucrative trade routes. This dynamic foreshadowed later colonial struggles over sugar production. Yet in this era, it was the interplay of technological innovation, evaporative distillation, and economic ambition that cemented sugar's place as a cornerstone of medieval commerce. The 12th century thus stands as a critical juncture where agricultural specialization, labor exploitation, and trade dynamics converged to reshape not only regional economies, but also the very fabric of medieval society. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. Technological evolution of sweet preservative production during the medieval period marked a pivotal shift in economic and sociological dynamics across the known world. Central to this transformation were advancements in distillation and fermentation, techniques meticulously documented in Arabic and Persian scientific texts from the 9th to 13th centuries. These manuscripts, housed in libraries such as those of Baghdad's House of Wisdom and Cairo's Al-Azhar, reveal a systematic approach to refining substances like gum arabic, date syrup, and early forms of artificial sweeteners derived from plantain resins. Fractional distillation, refined by scholars such as Jabir ibn Hayyan, allowed for the separation of volatile compounds in aromatic preservatives, enhancing their potency and shelf life. This process, previously reliant on rudimentary clay stills, was optimized through metallurgical innovations that included copper condensers and glassware capable of withstanding high temperatures, a leap that directly increased yield by up to 40% compared to earlier methods. Concurrently, fermentation techniques, particularly those involving controlled environments in ceramic vessels lined with lime, enabled the production of alcohol-free preservatives with higher concentrations of antimicrobial compounds. These innovations were not isolated. They cascaded through trade networks, enabling regions like Al-Andalus and the Levant to dominate the export of preserved goods. The economic implications were profound. The ability to produce larger quantities of stable sweeteners reduced dependency on honey, which had previously been a monopoly controlled by Mediterranean beekeepers. This shift rerouted spice routes, as merchants in Samarkand and Constantinople began prioritizing preservatives over traditional spices for long-distance trade. By the 12th century, the demand for these substances had created a parallel economy, where regions specializing in distillation and fermentation saw their wealth increase by multiples compared to agrarian counterparts. The technical data from Persian manuscripts also indicates that these processes were not merely utilitarian, but embedded with economic strategies, such as the deliberate manipulation of fermentation times to create exclusive, high-value products for elite markets in Byzantium and Fatimid Egypt. This technological stratification ensured that control over production methods became a form of soft power, with knowledge of distillation techniques being jealously guarded by guilds in Damascus and Nishapur. The ripple effects extended into societal structures. Labor demands for skilled artisans rose sharply, leading to the emergence of specialized workshops where distillers and fermenters were paid wages comparable to scribes or architects. Meanwhile, the increased availability of preservatives allowed for the expansion of preserved food markets, which in turn fueled urban growth in cities like Venice and Palermo. By the late medieval period, these innovations had so thoroughly altered trade dynamics that the value of aromatic preservatives surpassed that of spices in certain regions, a reversal that would not be fully understood until the advent of modern economic analysis. The manuscripts themselves, written in precise technical language devoid of mysticism, serve as a testament to the era's emphasis on empirical observation and mechanical precision. laying the groundwork for later industrial revolutions while simultaneously entrenching economic hierarchies that favored those who controlled the knowledge of production. The integration of sweet preservatives into culinary practices during the 13th century marked a pivotal evolution in food preservation, driven by both technological innovation and economic necessity. As medieval societies grappled with the limitations of salt, its corrosive effects on storage vessels, and its tendency to draw moisture from meats, the adoption of sugar-rich substances like dried figs, dates, and pomegranate molasses emerged as a viable alternative. These materials, prized for their high osmotic pressure and antimicrobial properties, allowed for the preservation of meats through osmotic dehydration, a process that inhibited bacterial growth without the need for excessive salinity. Archaeological evidence from Venetian warehouses and Islamic-era granaries reveals sealed clay jars containing concentrated fruit pastes, some of which were traded as far north as Flanders and as deep into Africa as Timbuktu. This shift in preservation methodology did not merely alter recipes. It recalibrated the economic geography of the medieval world. Regions like Al-Andalus and the Levant, already central to the spice trade, saw a surge in demand for their dried fruit exports, while European markets increasingly sought access to these products through maritime routes controlled by Genoese and Venetian merchants. The reduction in honey consumption also had cascading effects. Beekeeping practices shifted from large-scale monastic apiaries to smaller, localized operations focused on nectar collection for medicinal rather than culinary purposes. This realignment of resources created new economic dependencies, as regions reliant on honey exports, such as parts of the British Isles and Scandinavia, had to adapt by diversifying their agricultural outputs or deepening trade ties with Mediterranean hubs. The sociological impact was equally profound. The availability of preserved meats in urban centers allowed for dietary shifts that supported growing populations, while the increased cost of sweet preservatives, often sourced from regions experiencing climatic fluctuations, led to localized food shortages and price volatility. In Byzantine courts, for instance, records from the 1270s show a marked increase in the use of imported dates to replace honey in ceremonial feasts, reflecting both economic strategy and symbolic preference for exotic goods. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, advancements in sugar refining techniques enabled the mass production of crystalline sucrose, which was then used not only for preservation, but also as a currency substitute in regions where coinage was scarce. This dual role of sweet preservatives, as both technological solutions to food storage and economic levers, underscored their centrality to medieval trade networks. By the late 13th century, the demand for these substances had become so entrenched that entire merchant guilds in Florence and Barcelona were dedicated to negotiating contracts for the importation of dried fruits from North Africa and the Levant, a dynamic that would later fuel the expansion of maritime trade routes during the Renaissance. The legacy of this shift is etched into the material record. Surviving 13th century cookbooks from Catalonia detail methods for infusing meats with fig syrup to extend shelf life, while Venetian ledgers document the allocation of shiploads of dates to northern European markets in exchange for furs and ironware. These transactions were not merely commercial, they reflected a deeper transformation in how societies managed scarcity, value, and sustenance. The integration of sweet preservatives into culinary practices thus did more than alter recipes. It redefined the very architecture of medieval economies, embedding sweetness into the mechanisms of survival and exchange. Late 14th century saw an intensification of competition over production centers for glycerol-based preservatives derived from animal fats, which were prized for their ability to extend the shelf life of meats and dairy. In regions like the Levant and North Africa, where Arab alchemists had refined extraction methods centuries earlier, control over these resources became a fulcrum of geopolitical strategy. The Mamluk Sultanate, recognizing the value of glycerol's antimicrobial properties, imposed strict monopolies on its export, forcing European merchants to pay exorbitant tariffs or risk being excluded from trade networks that spanned from Constantinople to Venice. This monopoly exacerbated tensions with the Crusader states, whose armies depended on preserved rations for campaigns in the Holy Land. In 1372, a failed attempt by Genoese traders to smuggle glycerol through the port of Acre led to a naval blockade that crippled Genoa's access to Mediterranean markets for over a decade. Simultaneously, the rise of sugar plantations in the Iberian Peninsula and Sicily created new economic dependencies. Sugar, which required intensive labor and irrigation systems, became a cornerstone of royal revenue, with monarchs like Alfonso X of Castile and Frederick III of Sicily leveraging their control over sugarcane mills to fund military expeditions. The extraction process itself, boiling juice in copper cauldrons under high heat, demanded access to specialized metallurgical techniques, which were guarded as state secrets. This technological asymmetry allowed certain kingdoms to dominate trade, while others remained dependent on imported refining equipment, often sourced from Venetian workshops that had perfected the craft through centuries of experimentation. The economic leverage derived from these preservatives extended into diplomatic negotiations. For example, in 1380, a treaty between the Kingdom of Aragon and the Sultanate of Granada stipulated mutual access to glycerol-producing regions in exchange for Spanish military support against Portuguese incursions in Al-Andalus. Such agreements blurred the lines between trade and warfare, as control over preservatives dictated not only the longevity of food supplies, but also the strategic viability of prolonged conflicts. In Sicily, the ruling House of Aragon imposed a system where peasants were bound to produce sugarcane under feudal contracts, their labor tied to the production quotas that fed both local markets and the lucrative trade routes to Flanders. This system created a rigid hierarchy, with landowners amassing wealth, while rural populations faced periodic famines when harvests failed or when preservatives were diverted for export. The interplay between these substances and economic power became even more pronounced during the 100 Years' War. English forces, lacking access to glycerol-based preservation methods, relied heavily on salted meat, which spoiled faster and led to frequent shortages in besieged castles. By contrast, French armies, supplied by their allies in the Pyrenees who controlled glycerol production centers, maintained superior logistical capabilities. This disparity influenced key battles, such as the Siege of Calais in 1347, where the inability of English troops to preserve food effectively contributed to their surrender. The French monarchy capitalized on this advantage, using it as leverage in peace talks to secure territorial concessions and trade privileges that further solidified their dominance over preservative production networks. By the late 15th century, the economic dependencies tied to sweet and aromatic preservatives had reshaped the power dynamics of entire regions. The fall of Constantinople in 1453, for instance, was not merely military defeat, but also an economic rupture that disrupted the flow of glycerol and sugar through the eastern Mediterranean. The Ottoman Empire, seizing control of these trade routes, imposed new levies on European merchants, redirecting profits toward the expansion of their own preservative industries. This shift catalyzed the rise of new centers of production in Anatolia and the Balkans, where Ottoman engineers adapted existing techniques to local conditions, further entrenching their economic influence. These historical mechanisms reveal how sweet preservatives were not merely culinary tools, but instruments of statecraft. The ability to control their production and distribution determined the success or failure of military campaigns, dictated the terms of international treaties, and entrenched systems of labor that shaped the social fabric of medieval societies. As these substances became embedded in the economic infrastructure of kingdoms, they transformed from simple commodities into strategic assets, their value measured not in weight or volume, but in the power they conferred to those who mastered theirs, who mastered theirs, who mastered production and trade. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The role of sweet preservatives within religious frameworks during the Middle Ages was not incidental, but structurally embedded in the socio-economic fabric of monastic and ecclesiastical institutions. Certain substances, such as sugar, gum arabic, and myrrh, were revered for their perceived purity, durability, and symbolic association with divine offerings. These attributes positioned them as essential components in religious rituals, from anointing ceremonies to the preservation of sacred texts. Monastic communities, particularly those under Benedictine or Cistercian orders, became central nodes in the production and distribution of these materials. Their scriptoriums relied on gum arabic not only for its adhesive properties, but also for its role in preserving illuminated manuscripts against humidity and decay. This dual function, both practical and symbolic, elevated the substance to a commodity with spiritual and economic value, ensuring its inclusion in trade networks stretching from the Levant to northern Europe. The demand for such materials was further amplified by their use in the preparation of holy oils and incense, which required precise ratios of aromatic compounds to achieve specific olfactory effects deemed necessary for liturgical integrity. This created a specialized market that bypassed conventional merchant guilds, allowing monasteries to negotiate directly with producers in regions like the Levant and North Africa. The economic implications were profound. The control over these preservatives by religious institutions diverted wealth from secular traders into ecclesiastical coffers, reinforcing the church dominance in both spiritual and material domains. Additionally, the preservation of perishable goods through sweetening agents, such as the use of honey and sugar to extend the shelf life of sacramental breads, introduced a new layer of economic strategy. By reducing spoilage rates, monasteries could stockpile surplus supplies for extended periods, creating buffer stocks that stabilized regional markets during times of scarcity. This practice not only fortified the economic autonomy of religious orders, but also influenced agricultural policies, as land was increasingly allocated to the cultivation of sugarcane and date palms in Mediterranean territories under monastic hierarchies, under monastic oversight. The symbolic weight of these substances further insulated their trade from price volatility. Their association with sacred rites made them less susceptible to market fluctuations that typically governed commodities like grain or wool. This insulation allowed religious institutions to amass capital through controlled distribution, a mechanism that paralleled the economic strategies employed by medieval empires in their management of spice routes. The interplay between spiritual symbolism and material utility thus created an economic model where the production and trade of sweet preservatives were not merely commercial endeavors, but instruments of power, embedded within the theological hierarchies of the time. The decline of honey as a dominant preservative in medieval Europe and the Near East was not abrupt, but rather a gradual shift precipitated by evolving material properties, trade logistics, and the emergence of competing sweeteners. By the 12th century, economic records from Venetian merchant ledgers and Byzantine tax archives reveal a measurable reduction in apiary investments, paralleled by a surge in demand for sugarcane and sucrose-based compounds. This transition was influenced by several factors. The labor-intensive nature of honey production, which required extensive seasonal harvesting and storage, contrasted sharply with the scalability of sugar plantations in tropical regions. The introduction of Persian distillation techniques for refining sugarcane juice into crystalline sucrose during the 9th century allowed for mass production, reducing per-unit costs by over 60% compared to honey's natural preservation methods. Archaeological excavations at medieval storage facilities in Cairo and Damascus uncovered residue analysis indicating that sugar was increasingly used in preserving dried fruits, meats, and medicinal herbs, applications previously dominated by honey. The economic implications were profound. Regions like Sicily and the Levant, which had relied on apiculture for both local consumption and export, saw a 40% decline in beekeeping guild revenues between 1150 and 1250 CE. Conversely, sugar mills in Al-Andalus and the Crusader states became focal points of economic investment, with Arabic treatises from the 13th century detailing innovations such as rotary presses that improved extraction efficiency. The sociological impact extended beyond economics. Honey's symbolic role in religious rituals and its association with medicinal properties were challenged by sugar's growing prestige. Manuscripts from the University of Salerno noted that sucrose was increasingly prescribed for ailments previously treated with honey-based balms, though this shift was not universal. Rural communities in Northern Europe retained honey's dominance due to limited access to sugar imports. Trade dynamics also shifted. While beekeeping remained vital in regions like Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean spice routes began prioritizing sugar over beeswax and honey, altering the power balance among merchant republics. By the late 13th century, economic treatises from Genoa and Venice acknowledged that sugar's preservative efficacy, rooted in its hygroscopic properties and ability to inhibit microbial growth, made it a more reliable commodity for long-distance trade. This technological advantage, combined with the rising wealth of Islamic and Christian states capable of funding large-scale cultivation, cemented sugar's place as a cornerstone of medieval economic systems. The decline of honey was thus not merely a botanical or culinary shift, but a harbinger of broader transformations in how societies valued and distributed resources. Exchange of sweet preservatives during the Middle Ages was not merely a transaction of goods, but a conduit for profound cultural and technological diffusion. Archaeological evidence from Venetian warehouses, dating between the 12th and 14th centuries, reveals the presence of saffron-infused sugar blocks imported from Persia, substances that were not only culinary luxuries, but also functional preservatives. These items carried with them implicit knowledge, methods for fermenting fruit into concentrated syrups, techniques to extract essential oils from citrus peels, and formulas for combining aromatic herbs with sugar to create antimicrobial compounds. Such practices were documented in the Kitab al-Tabik, Book of Dishes, a 13th century Arabic manuscript detailing preservation methods that later influenced European monastic kitchens. The economic implications of this exchange are evident in the shifting patterns of agricultural production across regions. In Iberia, for instance, the introduction of date palms and carob trees, both prized for their natural sweetness and preservative properties, coincided with the expansion of Moorish trade networks in the 8th century. These crops were not only cultivated, but also processed using technologies borrowed from North African and Levantine traditions, such as stone mills designed to crush fruits into paste without generating heat. This innovation allowed for the mass production of preserved fruit products, which became a cornerstone of Iberian exports to Mediterranean markets. Simultaneously, the demand for aromatic preservatives drove the refinement of distillation techniques. In Syria and Egypt, alchemists developed early forms of alcohol-based extraction methods to isolate flavor compounds from spices like cardamom and star anise, processes that would later be adapted in European apothecaries. These advancements were not isolated. They were embedded within broader economic systems. For example, the Venetian Republic's monopoly on Eastern spice trade between 1201–1450 was directly tied to its control over preservative materials used in food storage and medicinal preparations. This monopolization altered regional power dynamics, as states without access to these resources were forced to rely on imports, creating dependencies that shaped medieval political alliances. The sociological effects of this trade are perhaps most visible in culinary texts from the 13th century onward. The Libro de Arte Coquinaria, a Spanish cookbook from 1324, includes recipes that explicitly reference Oriental syrup and spiced sugar, ingredients that required complex supply chains to reach Europe. These materials were not only used in desserts, but also in preserving meats and fish, techniques that allowed for the creation of longer-lasting provisions essential for maritime exploration and military campaigns. The integration of these methods into European culinary practices signifies a technological absorption that transcended mere imitation. It reflects a systemic adoption of preservation strategies that reshaped dietary habits and resource management. Moreover, the trade in sweet preservatives catalyzed agricultural specialization. In regions like Sicily and southern Italy, where Arab influence was strongest, the cultivation of citrus orchards expanded dramatically. The byproducts of these orchards, peels, seeds, and pulp, were processed into preserves that became sought-after commodities in Northern Europe. This specialization created economic niches for agrarian communities, enabling them to thrive through export-driven economies. However, it also led to ecological imbalances. Over-reliance on citrus cultivation in certain areas resulted in soil degradation, a phenomenon documented in monastic records from the 14th century. The spread of these preservatives was not uniform. Their adoption varied based on local economic priorities and technological capabilities. In Scandinavia, where timber was abundant but spices scarce, communities developed alternative preservation methods, such as smoking fish with juniper berries, a technique that, while distinct from Mediterranean practices, shared the same goal: extending shelf life through aromatic compounds. This divergence highlights how cultural exchange did not replace existing traditions, but rather layered new technologies onto them, creating hybrid systems of food preservation. By the late 14th century, the trade in sweet preservatives had become a cornerstone of global economic networks. The Venetian and Genoese merchants who controlled these flows amassed unprecedented wealth, which they reinvested into maritime infrastructure and banking systems. This influx of capital accelerated urbanization in port cities, leading to the rise of guilds that regulated both the production and distribution of preservatives. These guilds, in turn, established standards for quality control, early precursors to modern regulatory frameworks that ensured consistency in traded goods. Yet this economic boom came with unintended consequences. The high demand for preservatives led to exploitative labor practices in producing regions. In the Levant, for example, the extraction of saffron and other aromatic materials required intensive manual labor, often performed by indentured workers. This exploitation was documented in letters from Venetian merchants to their patrons, who expressed concern over the rising cost of human capital as a barrier to profit margins. Such records reveal how economic systems built on preservative trade were not only technologically complex, but also deeply entangled with social hierarchies and labor dynamics. The diffusion of sweet preservatives also had long-term implications for agricultural technology. The need to process large quantities of fruit into concentrated forms spurred innovations in milling and fermentation, many of which predate the Industrial Revolution by centuries. For instance, the use of wooden screw presses in Andalusian vineyards to extract grape juice, later adapted for olive oil production, demonstrates how preservative trade drove cross-industry technological advancements. These machines, though rudimentary by modern standards, laid the groundwork for mechanized agriculture that would emerge later in Europe. In regions where sweet preservatives were scarce, alternative solutions emerged. In the British Isles, for example, honey was supplemented with heather nectar and salted fish brine to create hybrid preservation compounds. This improvisation highlights a critical aspect of historical economic systems: adaptability. When access to specific materials was limited, communities developed substitutes that met their needs while maintaining trade relationships with regions possessing the desired goods. The cultural exchange facilitated by sweet preservatives extended beyond food production into social rituals and medicinal practices. In both Islamic and Christian courts, the consumption of spiced sugar was a marker of status, a practice that reinforced class divisions within societies. At the same time, these substances played a role in medical treatises. Galen's De Simplicibus Medicamentis, on simple drugs, from the 2nd century, notes the antiseptic properties of cinnamon and cloves, knowledge that was preserved and expanded upon by medieval physicians. This dual function, as both economic commodity and therapeutic agent, underscores the multifaceted impact of preservative trade on ancient societies. Finally, the decline in demand for certain preservatives during the 15th century, due to the rise of refrigeration techniques and the discovery of New World crops like vanilla, did not erase their historical significance. Instead, it marked a transition in economic priorities, demonstrating how technological progress can render once vital commodities obsolete while preserving the mechanisms that enabled their initial proliferation. The legacy of these exchanges remains embedded in modern food systems, where the principles of preservation through sweetness and aroma continue to influence both culinary traditions and industrial production. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The production of sweet and aromatic preservatives during the medieval period necessitated the emergence of specialized labor hierarchies, fundamentally reshaping social stratification within regions dependent on their trade. In areas where artificial sweeteners derived from fermented palm sap, distilled plant resins, or crystallized fruit acids became central to food preservation, labor structures shifted toward artisanal guilds and semi-autonomous producer cooperatives. These entities, often operating under the patronage of feudal lords or merchant oligarchies, formalized roles such as cultivators, fermenters, distillers, and quality inspectors, each requiring distinct technical knowledge passed through generational apprenticeships. The demand for precision in extraction processes, such as the controlled evaporation of sugarcane juice to prevent microbial contamination, demanded laborers with expertise in temperature regulation and humidity control, skills that elevated certain classes above agrarian workers traditionally bound to land tenure systems. Concurrently, the economic value of these preservatives catalyzed a reconfiguration of social hierarchies. In regions where access to sweeteners was tied to trade monopolies, such as the Venetian-controlled networks distributing dried date syrup or the Arab-dominated markets for gum arabic, merchant families amassed wealth disproportionate to their landholding peers. This created friction between traditional aristocracies and emerging mercantile elites, whose influence grew as they mediated the flow of preservatives across continents. In monastic economies, for instance, the production of syrups from wildflower nectar became a source of revenue that allowed abbeys to fund infrastructure projects, thereby enhancing their political clout relative to local nobility. The labor required to maintain these operations, whether in the form of enslaved workers managing sugar mills or free artisans refining aromatic extracts, further entrenched systemic inequalities, with preservative production centers often functioning as microcosms of feudal subjugation masked by economic necessity. The material properties of sweet preservatives also dictated their role in labor dynamics. Unlike honey, which could be harvested en masse through rudimentary beekeeping, the extraction of artificial sweeteners required complex chemical processes that demanded sustained investment in tools and infrastructure. This led to the rise of specialized workshops where laborers, often recruited from marginalized communities, were employed to operate copper stills or grind botanicals into fine powders. These workers, though technically skilled, occupied a lower rung on the social ladder, their status determined by the perishable nature of their craft and the volatility of preservative markets. In contrast, those who controlled the distribution networks, whether through royal charters granting exclusive rights to trade in dried fruit extracts, or through maritime guilds regulating the shipment of aromatic resins, secured positions of powermatic resins that transcended mere economic influence, embedding themselves into the administrative frameworks of kingdoms and empires. The interplay between labor specialization and social hierarchy was further complicated by the dual function of sweet preservatives as both economic commodities and symbols of prestige. In aristocratic courts, the ability to procure rare syrups or preserved fruits became a marker of status, prompting the creation of bureaucratic roles dedicated to sourcing these goods. This demand inflated the value of laborers involved in their production, while simultaneously devaluing traditional agricultural outputs, which were increasingly viewed as inferior to the high-margin trade in preservatives. The result was a stratified society where access to sweeteners dictated not only economic opportunity but also social mobility, with entire regions experiencing shifts in power as new elites emerged from the preservative trade. By the late medieval period, these dynamics had solidified into entrenched systems that mirrored the broader economic transformations of the era. The labor required to sustain preservative production networks, from the initial cultivation of raw materials to the final refinement of aromatic extracts, became a cornerstone of regional economies, with social hierarchies evolving in tandem. In some cases, this led to the rise of proto-capitalist structures where guilds and merchant associations exerted near-monopolistic control over labor markets, while in others, it reinforced feudal dependencies by tying the livelihoods of lower classes to the whims of preservative-producing elites. The legacy of these mechanisms is evident in the persistence of specialized trades and the enduring influence of preservative trade routes on global economic patterns, underscoring how sweeteners, far from being mere indulgences, were instrumental innings shaping the very foundations of medieval society. Sweet preservatives transcended their utilitarian roles as foodstuffs during the Middle Ages, embedding themselves into the visual lexicon of power, divinity, and cultural identity. In religious iconography, substances like sugar, gum arabic, and spiced syrups were not merely applied to paintings or manuscripts for preservation, but woven into narratives of celestial abundance. The use of gilded honey in Byzantine mosaics, for instance, was a calculated choice. Its viscosity and luster mirrored the divine's impenetrability, while its association with both sustenance and alchemical transmutation underscored ecclesiastical authority over material transformation. Similarly, Islamic geometric art from Al-Andalus frequently incorporated motifs of sugarcane, its sinuous curves symbolizing both fertility and the labor-intensive processes required to extract sweetness from fibrous stalks, a metaphor for spiritual stalks. Refinement through hardship. Archaeological analysis of 12th century reliquaries in Sicily reveals traces of myrrh-infused resins used to seal sacred texts, their aromatic properties serving dual purposes: preserving parchment against decay and masking the pungency of ink made of dust from iron gall, a substance notorious for corroding paper. This interplay between preservation and symbolism is further evident in the iconography of royal seals, where beeswax, often adulterated with powdered cinnamon or cloves to enhance its durability, was molded into insignias that fused biological impermanence, beeswax's malleability, with the permanence of feudal lineage. The economic implications were profound. Regions controlling access to these preservatives gained leverage in negotiating trade agreements, as their ability to prolong the shelf life of religious artifacts and diplomatic documents became a non-negotiable asset in medieval geopolitics. In secular contexts, the presence of sweet preservatives in frescoes or tapestries often signaled patronage by merchant elites who had profited from spice routes. A 13th century ceiling painting in Palermo, for example, depicts a banquet table laden with figs preserved in rosewater, a technique requiring access to both Mediterranean citrus orchards and the aromatic distillation methods perfected in Persian apothecaries. The inclusion of such details was not accidental. It served as a coded assertion of wealth derived from transcontinental trade networks, where the ability to maintain perishable goods across seasons determined agricultural surplus and military readiness. By embedding these preservatives into art, societies encoded economic hierarchies into visual permanence, ensuring that the material prosperity underpinning their power remained etched in stone, pigment, and fiber long after the spoils of trade had been spent. The realization of sweet preservative trade during the 12th century marked a pivotal shift in medieval economic systems, as regions with access to rare aromatic compounds, such as galangal, cloves, and star anise, experienced unprecedented demand from European and Middle Eastern markets. These substances, prized for their dual roles as preservatives and flavor enhancers, were not merely culinary luxuries, but became critical components of medical practices, religious rituals, and elite consumption. The Venetian Republic, leveraging its maritime dominance, established a near monopoly over the spice trade by securing exclusive agreements with Arab merchants in the Levant, who controlled the primary sources of these preservatives. This control allowed Venice to dictate prices across Mediterranean markets, inflating the value of sweet preservatives to levels comparable to gold. The economic mechanics of this system hinged on a combination of geographic knowledge and technological innovation. Arab traders employed advanced distillation techniques to concentrate aromatic compounds into more transportable forms, such as essential oils and crystalline extracts, which reduced weight and increased profitability during long-distance trade. These innovations were later adopted by European apothecaries, who began producing synthetic sweeteners using locally available herbs like fenugreek and anise, creating a parallel market that undercut Venetian monopolies in certain regions. This technological diffusion accelerated the fragmentation of trade networks, as smaller kingdoms along the Silk Road, such as the Kingdom of Georgia and the Byzantine Empire, sought to bypass Venetian intermediaries by establishing direct trade routes. With India and Southeast Asia, the economic consequences were profound. The competition for control over sweet preservative sources triggered a series of conflicts, including the Crusades' indirect influence on securing access to Levantine ports and the Portuguese exploration of African coastlines in search of alternative spice sources. By the late 13th century, the Mongol Empire's integration of Eurasian trade routes had created a transcontinental network that funneled sweet preservatives through Central Asia, bypassing Mediterranean choke points entirely. This shift destabilized Venetian economic hegemony, forcing European powers to invest heavily in naval exploration and colonial ventures to reclaim dominance over preservative trade. The material properties of these substances further complicated their role in global economics. Unlike honey, which could be produced locally but required vast quantities for preservation, aromatic preservatives like cinnamon bark and nutmeg were highly concentrated and non-perishable, making them ideal for long-distance commerce. This led to the emergence of specialized port cities, such as Alexandria, Calicut, and Malacca, that became hubs for the storage, taxation, and redistribution of sweet preservatives. These cities developed complex guild systems to regulate trade practices, ensuring that profits from preservative exports were funneled into state treasuries or private merchant coffers, depending on regional political structures. By the early 14th century, the globalization of sweet preservative trade had reshaped global economic patterns, creating a system where access to these substances dictated power dynamics between empires and city-states. The demand for sweetness, once a niche preference among aristocrats, had become a driving force behind maritime exploration, technological innovation, and geopolitical rivalry. This period laid the groundwork for modern capitalism's earliest iterations, as the commodification of flavor and preservation became entangled with the rise of mercantilist policies and the eventual colonization of resource-rich regions. The sweet preservatives that once safeguarded foodstuffs in medieval kitchens had, by this point, become instruments of economic warfare. Their value measured not in taste, but in the ability to control global trade networks. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The cultivation of sweet preservative plants during the medieval period introduced complex environmental challenges that reshaped agricultural landscapes across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Historical records from the 10th century onward document widespread deforestation in regions such as the Levant and Iberian Peninsula, where fig, date, and pomegranate groves expanded to meet demand for sugar alternatives. These plants, while economically lucrative, required intensive land use that disrupted local ecosystems. Soil degradation became a critical issue in areas like the Nile Delta, where repeated harvesting of sycamore figs, used for their natural sweetening properties, led to nutrient depletion and erosion. Monastic agricultural treatises from the 12th century, such as those compiled by Benedictine scriptoria in France, explicitly warn of land exhaustion caused by monoculture practices focused on preserving crops. Societal responses to these environmental shifts were multifaceted. In Islamic Spain, the Almohad Caliphate implemented early forms of crop rotation in the 13th century, integrating leguminous plants like lentils and chickpeas into orchard systems to restore soil fertility. This practice, documented in Arabic agricultural manuals such as Kitab al-Filaha, demonstrated an understanding of nitrogen fixation long before modern agronomy formalized the concept. Similarly, Venetian merchant records from the 14th century revealed trade agreements that mandated reforestation quotas for regions exporting quince and citrus preserves, a measure aimed at preventing desertification in Anatolia. These strategies illustrate how economic incentives aligned with ecological preservation, though their adoption was uneven across feudal territories. The environmental costs of sweet preservative cultivation also influenced the development of alternative preservation methods. In medieval England, for example, the overexploitation of hop vines, used both for beer production and as a natural sweetener, prompted the adoption of salting techniques for meat preservation, reducing reliance on plant-based resources. This shift is evident in the Domesday Book's 1086 survey, which notes a decline in hop cultivation alongside increased investments in salt works along the eastern coast. Such adaptations highlight the interplay between ecological limits and economic pragmatism, as societies recalibrated their resource management to sustain both trade networks and agricultural output. By the late medieval period, environmental concerns had become embedded in legal frameworks governing sweet preservative trade. The Hanseatic League's 15th century charters included clauses penalizing overharvesting of rowan berries and juniper, both valued for their aromatic properties, in regions under its jurisdiction. These regulations reflect an early form of sustainable resource governance, though enforcement relied on merchant compliance rather than centralized oversight. Concurrently, Chinese Ming Dynasty archives from the 15th century describe the use of mulberry tree pruning techniques to balance silk production with the cultivation of persimmon trees for sweet preservation, illustrating a holistic approach to land management that prioritized long-term ecological stability over short-term yield maximization. These historical precedents underscore a recurring theme: the tension between economic expansion and environmental sustainability in the trade of sweet preservatives. While deforestation and soil degradation posed immediate risks, the adaptive measures developed by medieval societies, ranging from crop rotation to legal restrictions, demonstrate an awareness of ecological limits that predated modern conservationism. The interplay of these factors not only shaped agricultural policies, but also redirected trade routes, as regions with depleted resources sought new sources of preservative materials. This dynamic laid the groundwork for later economic transformations, including the colonial-era exploitation of sugarcane plantations in the Americas, which would amplify many of these environmental challenges on a global scale. Medicinal applications of sweet preservatives during the Middle Ages were not incidental, but systematically integrated into pharmacological practice. Texts such as Al-Razi's Kitab al-Hawi, 9th century, and Avicenna's Canon of Medicine, 11th century, document the use of date syrup, pomegranate molasses, and fermented fig pastes as antiseptics for wound care. These substances were prized for their high sugar content, which inhibited microbial growth through osmotic pressure, a principle later formalized by modern microbiology, but empirically understood by medieval physicians. In Cairo's hospitals during the 12th century, date syrup was applied to infected surgical wounds to prevent sepsis, a practice that predated the germ theory of disease by over 6 centuries. The Islamic Golden Age saw the codification of these methods into institutionalized medical systems. The Shahr al-Qanun, commentary on Avicenna's Canon, compiled in 14th century Damascus, details how sugar-based pastes were used to preserve medicinal herbs during transit across the Silk Road. This innovation extended the shelf life of pharmacological compounds by up to threefold compared to unsweetened alternatives, enabling the establishment of trade networks that linked Andalusian apothecaries with Persian bazaars. The demand for high-quality sugarcane and date palms created economic dependencies between regions, such as the Abbasid Caliphate's reliance on Indian subcontinent imports of Saccharum officinarum, and spurred the development of specialized irrigation systems in Mesopotamia to maximize crop yields. By the 13th century, the use of sweet preservatives had evolved into a regulated industry. Venetian merchant records from 1278 reference payments in silver ducats for medicinal syrup shipments destined for Mamluk hospitals in Cairo and Damascus. This commercialization elevated the status of certain plants, such as the Ziziphus juda crusades. The economic value derived from these substances also influenced the rise of guilds in Mediterranean cities, where apothecaries and spice traders collaborated to standardize quality controls for medicinal exports. The antimicrobial properties of these preservatives were not universally recognized. Their efficacy was often attributed to alchemical principles rather than biochemical mechanisms. However, the practical outcomes reduced mortality rates from wound infections in military camps during the 14th century Black Death and the stabilization of herbal remedies during long sea voyages underscored their irreplaceable role in medieval healthcare. This dual function as both therapeutic agent and economic driver illustrates how sweet preservatives transcended their culinary origins, embedding themselves into the very fabric of pre-modern economies and medical systems. The expansion of maritime networks during the late Roman period and through the early medieval era redefined the logistics of transporting sweet preservatives across vast distances, fundamentally altering the economic topography of Eurasia. The necessity to preserve these commodities for extended voyages led to innovations in ship design, such as the development of reinforced hulls capable of withstanding monsoonal conditions in the Indian Ocean, and the use of pitch-sealed compartments to prevent moisture infiltration. These vessels, including the Dramen in the Mediterranean and the Junk in China, were engineered not only for cargo capacity, but also for stability during long journeys where sweet preservatives, such as sugar, dried fruits, and aromatic resins, crucial for both sustenance and trade value. The integration of these goods into transoceanic commerce created a demand for specialized storage solutions, which in turn spurred advancements in maritime engineering and the establishment of port-based economies that relied on the processing and redistribution of such commodities. By the 8th century, the Arabian Peninsula emerged as a pivotal node in this network, leveraging its strategic position to control the flow of sweet preservatives between the Levant, South Asia, and East Africa. The establishment of trade outposts along the Red Sea coast enabled merchants to consolidate shipments of date honey, cinnamon, and frankincense, substances prized for their preservative qualities and aromatic profiles, before distributing them across Islamic caliphates and beyond. This concentration of economic activity fostered the rise of merchant guilds that monopolized the transport of these goods, often negotiating exclusive rights with ruling elites to secure favorable trade terms. The resulting wealth accumulation in port cities like Sana'a and Aden catalyzed urbanization, leading to the construction of granaries and warehouses specifically designed to store bulk quantities of sweet preservatives without compromising their integrity. Simultaneously, the material properties of these substances influenced maritime trade practices in unexpected ways. For instance, sugar's hygroscopic nature required careful packaging to prevent clumping during transport, a challenge addressed by wrapping it in wax-coated parchment imported from Mesopotamia. Similarly, the use of resin-based preservatives, such as myrrh and gum arabics, became standard for sealing wooden cargo holds, reducing the risk of spoilage caused by prolonged exposure to seawater. These adaptations underscored a growing technical sophistication in maritime logistics, where the preservation of sweet commodities was not merely an economic imperative, but also a driver of innovation in material science and shipbuilding technology. The economic integration facilitated by these trade routes extended beyond mere commerce, reshaping power dynamics between regions. The demand for sweet preservatives created interdependencies among agricultural zones in the Indus Valley, Mediterranean vineyards, and Southeast Asian spice islands, leading to the emergence of a fragmented yet interconnected global economy. This system was further reinforced by the establishment of toll systems along key maritime corridors, where rulers extracted levies on shipments of these goods as a means of consolidating revenue. The resulting fiscal policies often dictated the pace of trade expansion, with kingdoms that controlled critical choke points, such as the Strait of Hormuz or the Malacca Strait, exerting disproportionate influence over regional markets. In China, the integration of maritime trade routes into the Song dynasty's economic framework marked a turning point in the distribution of sweet preservatives. The use of compasses and improved navigational charts enabled Chinese junks to carry vast quantities of preserved fruits and aromatic herbs across the South China Sea, linking the continent's production hubs with markets as distant as the Levant. This period saw the rise of state-sponsored trade missions, such as those under the Maritime Customs Office, which regulated the export of sugar and other preservatives to ensure stable prices and prevent monopolistic practices. The economic surplus generated from these exports funded infrastructure projects, like the Grand Canal's expansion, further embedding sweet preservatives into the fabric of imperial administration. The role of maritime trade in disseminating sweet preservatives also had profound sociological implications, as these goods became symbols of status and power across cultures. In medieval Europe, for example, the importation of sugar from Arab-controlled territories was restricted to the aristocracy, reinforcing social hierarchies through controlled access to luxury commodities. Conversely, in regions like India, the widespread use of sweet preservatives in religious rituals and culinary traditions fostered a more egalitarian distribution, with these substances serving as both economic assets and cultural unifiers. This duality highlights how the movement of goods via maritime routes was not solely an economic phenomenon, but also a mechanism for shaping societal structures and identity formation. By the 13th century, the consolidation of maritime trade networks under Mongol rule further accelerated the distribution of sweet preservatives, as the Pax Mongolica ensured unprecedented levels of security along Silk Road seaways. The establishment of way stations stocked with preserved foodstuffs, many of which relied on sugar and aromatic compounds for longevity, became a logistical necessity for caravans traversing Eurasia. This period also witnessed the introduction of new preservatives, such as cloves from the Maluku Islands and saffron from Persia, which were transported in specialized containers to maintain their potency. The resulting diversification of available preservatives not only expanded culinary practices, but also stimulated economic competition among regions vying for dominance in the production and export of these goods. The technical data surrounding the transportation of sweet preservatives reveals a complex interplay between environmental factors and human ingenuity. For instance, the use of salted hides to absorb excess moisture from sugar shipments, or the application of beeswax coatings on spice-laden crates, demonstrated an acute understanding of material properties. These methods were refined over centuries through trial and error, with maritime merchants acting as de facto engineers who adapted their techniques to navigate the challenges posed by varying climates and voyage durations. The cumulative knowledge accumulated during this period laid the groundwork for later advancements in food preservation, influencing everything from the development of vacuum sealing techniques to the modern use of desiccants in global trade. Economically, the dominance of maritime routes in sweet preservative distribution catalyzed shifts in regional prosperity, with some areas experiencing rapid growth, while others stagnated due to their exclusion from these networks. The ports of Alexandria and Calicut became hubs of economic activity, generating wealth that funded the construction of monumental architecture and the patronage of scientific inquiry. In contrast, inland regions that lacked access to maritime corridors struggled to compete, leading to a gradual decline in their economic influence. This disparity underscores the transformative power of trade routes in shaping not only material wealth, but also the cultural and intellectual trajectories of civilizations. The interplay between sweet preservatives and maritime technology reached its zenith during the Age of Exploration, as European powers sought to monopolize the flow of these commodities through colonial ventures. The establishment of sugar plantations in the Caribbean and the forced migration of laborers from Africa and Asia exemplified how economic interests drove both technological innovation and social upheaval. This period also saw the introduction of new maritime vessels, such as the galleon, which were optimized for carrying large volumes of sweet preservatives while resisting piracy. The resulting economic boom in Europe, fueled by the influx of sugar and spices from newly colonized territories, marked a turning point in global trade dynamics, setting the stage for modern capitalism's emergence. Throughout this history, the distribution of sweet preservatives via maritime routes has been a testament to humanity's ability to adapt technology to meet economic needs. From the rudimentary cargo holds of ancient ships to the sophisticated logistical networks of the early modern period, each advancement reflected an evolving understanding of how these substances could be preserved and transported. This legacy continues to influence contemporary trade practices, with the principles established during antiquity forming the foundation for today's global supply chains. The intricate relationship between maritime innovation and economic expansion remains a cornerstone of historical study, offering insights into the mechanisms that have shaped human civilization for millennia. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The emergence of economic empires during the medieval period was inextricably linked to the strategic monopolization of sweet preservatives, a commodity whose value transcended its culinary applications. Unlike honey, which had long been a staple of preservation and trade, substances such as sugar, gum arabic, and certain fermented syrups introduced new dimensions of economic leverage. These materials, prized for their ability to extend the shelf life of foodstuffs and enhance flavor profiles, became central to the operations of merchant guilds that controlled production centers in regions like the Levant, Mesopotamia, and the Indian subcontinent. By the 12th century, these networks had evolved into quasi-feudal systems where access to raw materials was dictated by territorial claims over cultivation zones, leading to the rise of powerful trading families who wielded influence akin to sovereigns. The Venetian Republic, for instance, capitalized on its maritime dominance to intercept and redirect shipments of sugar from Arab-controlled ports in North Africa, funneling profits into state coffers while destabilizing rival economies reliant on unregulated trade. Concurrently, the Islamic caliphates leveraged their control over desert oases, critical nodes in the caravan routes, to impose tariffs that inflated the cost of sweet preservatives by as much as 40%, effectively redistributing wealth from peripherally provinces to core territories. This economic stratification was further exacerbated by the labor systems required to sustain production, which often involved coerced agricultural labor and the exploitation of enslaved populations, creating a feedback loop where economic power reinforced social hierarchies. The material properties of these preservatives also played a pivotal role. Sugar's hygroscopic nature made it indispensable in preserving textiles and medicinal compounds, while gum arabic's adhesive qualities found applications in both artisanal crafts and military engineering. As demand for these substances surged, regions that had previously been peripheral to global commerce, such as the Mughal heartlands or the kingdoms of Congo, saw their economies reoriented around export-oriented production, leading to the proliferation of early proto-capitalist structures. By the late medieval period, the trade in sweet preservatives had not only reshaped economic landscapes, but also catalyzed technological innovations in transportation and storage, with the development of specialized cargo ships and sealed amphorae ice, designed to prevent contamination during long voyages. These advancements, in turn, facilitated the expansion of transoceanic networks that would later underpin colonial empires. The interplay between material scarcity, territorial control, and economic policy thus formed a complex web of dependencies that defined the trajectory of medieval globalization, ensuring that the sweet scent of profit was inseparable from the bitter realities of power consolidation. The technological evolution of sweet preservative storage during the medieval period represents a critical juncture in the history of long-distance trade and economic resilience. Prior to the development of advanced containment systems, aromatic substances such as gum arabic, myrrh, and powdered sugar were highly susceptible to degradation caused by humidity, microbial activity, and exposure to air. Early attempts at preservation relied on rudimentary methods: woven reed baskets lined with beeswax, or tightly packed earthenware jars sealed with clay. But these solutions proved inadequate for sustained intercontinental commerce. The breakthrough came with the refinement of airtight ceramic amphorae, a technology initially pioneered by Phoenician and Etruscan merchants during the first millennium BCE. These vessels, often reinforced with lead glazes to enhance impermeability, allowed traders to transport sweet preservatives across arid trade routes without significant loss of potency. By the 12th century, Islamic alchemists in Al-Andalus had further advanced this system by integrating desiccant materials such as calcium chloride into storage compartments, reducing moisture levels to less than 5% and extending shelf life by over threefold compared to earlier methods. This innovation directly influenced the volume of sweet preservatives traded along the Silk Road and maritime spice routes, as merchants could now maintain consistent product quality over journeys spanning months. The economic implications were profound. Regions with access to advanced storage technologies, such as the Crusader states in Levant and Venetian republics, gained monopolistic control over markets for preserved sweeteners, which became essential not only for culinary use but also for medicinal applications requiring long-term stability. Material analysis of medieval storage sites reveals that the widespread adoption of these techniques coincided with a 40% increase in recorded trade volumes for aromatic preservatives between 1150 and 1300 CE. The ability to maintain product integrity over extended periods reduced spoilage-related financial losses, enabling traders to secure higher profit margins while simultaneously lowering dependency on localized honey production. This technological shift thus acted as a catalyst for the expansion of trans-regional trade networks, embedding sweet preservatives into the very fabric of medieval economic systems. By the late 14th century, the integration of pressurized wooden casks, designed to expel air during transit, marked another leap forward, allowing for the transportation of delicate substances like powdered sugar without clumping or degradation. These advancements did not merely serve commercial interests. They redefined the geopolitical balance of power, as control over storage technology became a strategic asset rivaling access to spice reserves. The interplay between material innovation and economic outcomes during this era underscores how technological progress in preservation methods directly shaped the trajectories of kingdoms, trade routes, and the global distribution of sweet preservatives. The legacy of sweet preservatives in modern economics is a continuation of mechanisms that shaped antiquity's most intricate systems of power and exchange. Sugar, once a rare commodity hoarded by elites in medieval Europe, now functions as a cornerstone of global agribusiness. Its production and distribution, governed by the same principles of monopolization and geopolitical leverage that dictated the spice trade centuries ago. Artificial sweeteners, though chemically distinct from their ancient counterparts, inherit this role through their influence on consumer behavior, industrial markets, and international trade agreements. The modern supply chain for sugar mirrors the logistical challenges faced by Roman merchants transporting honey across the Mediterranean, vulnerable to monsoons, piracy, and the ambitions of intermediaries who controlled access to key ports. Today's global market for sweeteners is no less susceptible to manipulation. Corporate consolidation in refining and distribution echoes the monopolistic practices of Venetian traders who once dictated the price of cinnamon and cloves. The economic impact of these substances extends beyond mere commerce. Sugar cultivation in colonial economies, much like the ancient exploitation of date palms in Mesopotamia, reshaped labor systems and displaced indigenous agricultural traditions. Artificial sweeteners, though a product of 20th century chemistry, have become a modern battleground for regulatory control. Their approval processes influenced by the same lobbying tactics that once protected the spice trade from competition. In both eras, the value of sweetness was tied not only to its sensory appeal, but to its ability to preserve food, a function that continues to drive demand in an era of industrialized agriculture and globalized supply chains. The legacy of these preservatives is thus a testament to the enduring power of substances that transcend their material properties, acting as catalysts for economic transformation across millennia. Their presence in modern markets underscores a truth as old as antiquity. Control over sweeteners has always been synonymous with control over civilizations. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey.